Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust the week's going well. The good news from Africa is an interesting article in Bloomberg Opinion by Tyler Cohen. There's a general feeling of optimism about Africa these days, and the good news, which runs deeper than rapidly improving health and quality of life indicators, deserves a closer look. Perhaps most significant, a relatively high proportion of sub-Saharan Africa is at peace today. It is more stable, less prone to conflict relative to previous decades. Violence in the Congo region and Rwanda, for instance, killed millions in the 1990s. There is nothing comparable going on today. This general move toward greater peace has been detailed in a recent report from the Institute for Security Studies. Peace will also pay a demographic dividend, as the aging of Africa's population and the marrying off of many of its young males will decrease the potential for conflict. Older, more settled populations are less likely to go to war. As long as peace holds, African nations should be able to continue to import new technologies from the rest of the world and, of course, develop some of their own. This will lead to a virtuous circle of greater education, higher productivity, more contentment with living standards, reinforcing the basic dynamic toward peace. Talking about greater national unity as well. One source again is simply that the colonial era is receding ever further into the past. So much more optimistic perspective, but you know, this demographic dividend could be a demographic type of have got jobs. LakeVictoriaBoatAccident mission to retrieve the wreckage aborted for the second time in 2 days. The crane mounted on MV Kalangala ferry is considered too weak by the officials to do the job. Tanzania President John Magufuli criticized other unnamed development partners for offering Tanzania aid that is tied to degrading conditions. Others may give you aid, but ask you to walk while bending over, he said. Praised China's no-strings-attached aid. Bloomberg's also reporting, contrasting with the Chinese, who said he don't meddle in African nations' affairs when they lend money. He was opening a $39 million University of Dar es Salaam library using a Chinese grant. Free things are really expensive, especially when they're provided by some countries. The only free things that won't cost you anything are those provided by China. He must be joking. Denmark is withholding $9.8 million in aid after Dar es Salaam's regional commissioner made unacceptable homophobic comments. The World Bank has suspended disbursement of a $300 million education loan. Human rights groups warn governance of the $52 billion economy is taking a turn for the worse. Authorities are detaining opposition leaders and free press advocates. And of course, he's put $200 million on the line with his cashew nut trade. South African business confidence at the lowest level since junk rating. South African business confidence fell to the lowest level since the country lost its investment grade rating, as political and policy uncertainty continued to weigh on sentiment. The reality is a multitude of political and policy issues, chief among them the uncertainty around the government's land reform plans, continue to weigh down on confidence. Unless these are resolved in a more speedily and concrete fashion, private sector fixed investment and by implication economic growth will remain disappointingly low. South African all shares down 13.7% year to date. Dollar versus rand, I think the rand's going to soften from here, 13.9206. Nigerian all share down 18.49% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange up 0.23% this year. Zimbabwe needs $171 million to deal with rural food shortages. More than 2 million Zimbabweans may need support to buy food between January and March, according to a report released Tuesday by the government of the World Food Programme. Look at this, as cash notes plus Nostro declined, bank deposits were increasing in line with the growth of money supply as the government used borrowing instruments, treasury bills to finance budget deficits. This led to a deterioration in the cash assets deposit ratio from 32% in 2009 to 3% in 2018, and therein lies the problem in Zimbabwe.